World War III.
I thought I was worried about it. I've seen that.
Well, but that proved not the case.
I was wrong, as I have been many times.
Did you agree with taking out the ISIS caliphate?
Well, if we took out the ISIS caliphate, why are they running Syria right now? And you're for that. Why is that?
What do you mean? I didn't say I'm for that.
You don't seem to have a problem with it.
I didn't say
ISIS
that.
is now running Syria. You're like, we'll see.
No, I did.
I mean, I know why.
By the way,
I know why.
push Assad toppled.
It's hilarious.
You
It's
know
like
why
Assad's bad, but no, ISIS runs Syria, but that's fine. We'll just kind of wait and see on ISIS. Not a big deal.
You know
Not a
why?
big deal. They're trying to kill
Hold on
Trump.
a second. I want to get back. You know why I don't care, and why, and you do your like trademark smirky laugh. I know why you don't care.
What are you even talking about?
Why don't I care?
I don't know why. You tell me. Because you think it's okay because they're not making angry noises or something, but by your own standards, their ISIS is so immoral that they must die, but now they're running Syria, and you don't think that we should take military action against the government of Syria because why? They're ISIS.
What I said is I don't know how good or bad it'll be. Look, I wouldn't push Assad out. He fell. He fell on his own, in part because he was heavily supported by Hezbollah, and when Israel took out the Hezbollah leadership, he lost his base of
But
support.
the current ISIS leadership, you don't think is bad? You can't say it's terrible that ISIS runs a country?
I am concerned about it.
Concerned? Aren't you horrified?
I want to see what they do.
Oh, so you got a wait-and-see attitude on ISIS now?
On the government of Syria, they are not actively, that I am aware of, trying to murder Americans. And that's a real dividing line. Are you trying to murder Americans or
I'm
not?
just saying it's a little weird that we waged war against ISIS and now they're running a country in the Mediterranean. I think that people would be very, very upset about that. You don't seem
By the
very
way,
upset
did
about
you agree with Trump taking out al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS?
I'm totally opposed to ISIS, and what I care about is results, actually, and if taking out the head of ISIS ends ISIS, I guess I'm for it, but now ISIS runs Syria,
Okay,
so I'm wondering
you
how
were
does
at the
this
time.
work?
I mean, my point is...
At the time, I mean, I've taken so many different positions over the years, some of which have been wrong. I really do my best to be honest and correct if they're and admit that I was wrong. I'm not one of these people who's like, I've always been consistent, no, my views change all the time because the facts change all the time. You're not going to get consistency from me, you're only going to get sincerity.
Well, look, I will say this, and look, I believe you're sincere.
Yeah,
but...
I'm not. I'm just some guy watching trying to figure out the right thing for America.
And I think because you believe you were mistaken, and I agree previously, I think you've overcorrected.
I overcorrected. I'm worried about turning this mess in Iran into a much larger mess. That's the concern, and that's a reasonable worry. Look, I know it's reasonable, and I know you're ready to call me all these names for asking. You're just asking questions. Yes, I am. So here's my question to you: if the Ayatollah is killed in Iran, and he very
well could.
I have just read in the paper this morning that Israel tried to take him out twice, and Trump told them not to.
I have read that. I don't have independent confirmation one way.
Do you think that they should take him out?
So I actually talked about it. As you know, I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. I actually talked about it in the latest podcast. And I said, look, I've seen the reporting that says that Trump asked them not to take out the Ayatollah. But I said the podcast is, I think it's reasonable for them to decide not to try to take him out. What they've done is targeted just about the entire top level of the military, the people that actually conduct the war. I can see an argument that taking out both the head of state and a religious leader could make him a martyr and could cause more problems than it's worth. And by the way, if you take out the Ayatollah, I don't know if the next guy isn't just as bad. And so I am...
What happens to the country?
I don't know, but you mentioned before, I want to go back to this. You said something like, you, like most other politicians, are engaged in moral terms. And let me be clear, I am talking about national interest. I am talking about protecting America. So there are bad guys on planet Earth that I don't think we should take out, even though they're bad guys.
Good.
I'll call them bad guys, but I'm not willing to use U.S. military force to take them out. In this instance, what Israel is doing is taking out their capacity to build nuclear weapons. Why? Because they judge the risk is too high.
I understand that. I understand that. I understand that. I think it's in progress. I think it'll probably be achieved, probably with U.S. military support. Who knows? But the president said he's for that.
And by the way, when military support is most needed is Fort Al, which is it's a bunker that's built under a mountain.
Right.
And Israel's taken out most of the rest, like Natanz, which is their big enrichment site. They bombed the hell out of it. Fort Al was deliberately built deep into a mountain so that Israel couldn't take it out. And there's an active discussion because the U.S. has bunker buster bombs that are big enough to take out Fort Al.
30,000 pounds.
Yeah,
Yes.
and Israel doesn't. So the one military piece that...
Nor the aircraft to fly them.
Right.
But here's, I guess, what bothers me is that I said 2 weeks ago, the real goal here is regime change in Iran. It's
I
not...
don't think that's Trump's goal.
Well, it's your goal. It's Israel's goal. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just saying it's important to be honest and not lie and not attack people for telling the truth.
So I believe I've been assiduously honest in this, but words matter. You said the real goal here is regime change, and it's your goal, and I want to be clear.
Well, you said it was your goal.
I want to be clear because words matter. Do I support regime change, and would I like a government that doesn't hate America and isn't trying to kill us in Iran? Yes, that's a good outcome. Is that the objective of these military strikes? I don't think necessarily. I don't know if it's Israel's. It's not my objective. My
Should
objective
it
is
be
taking
the U.S. if Israel decides we're going to decapitate the government and try to foment an uprising against it, should the United States participate in that operation in any way?
Look, I have not called for killing the Ayatollah. And there is, nations in war generally refrain from attacking and killing heads of state. Now, the Ayatollah doesn't. He's trying to kill Trump. We talked about that.
But we shouldn't punish him for it.
Look, there has been a long-standing, nations in war have refrained from killing heads of state. I have not publicly called for killing the Ayatollah. What I've called for is doing whatever is necessary to stop him from getting nuclear weapons. In the first Trump term, what that meant was maximum pressure. So in the first Trump term, I spent a lot of time urging the president to withdraw from the disastrous Iranian nuclear deal that Obama had. President Trump agreed with me. He did that. And then I urged him to end the oil waivers and to sanction the hell out of the country. And it ended up crippling their economy. So Iran at the time was selling 2 million barrels of oil a day. 1 million barrels of oil a day. When President Trump ended the oil waivers, it cut their sales to 300,000 barrels a day. At the end of the Trump term, the Iranian economy was in shambles. They had massive inflation. I think the regime was teetering. I think it might have fallen. I would use economic sanctions and I would use moral suasion to try to effectuate...
If you topple, okay, so you topple the regime by whatever means, what happens then? How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Well, why is it relevant whether it's,
because
90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is
because
that
if you don't
relevant?
know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and
What percent?
predominantly Shia. Okay,
No,
this is
it's
cute.
not
Okay.
even, you don't know anything about Iran. So
Okay,
actually
I am
country-
not the Tucker Carlson
No,
expert on Iran.
You're a
who
senator
says,
who's calling for the
you're the one
overthrow
who
of the
claims-
government.
you're the one
You
who
don't know anything
claims-
about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump.
No,
You're the
I'm
one
not saying that.
who can't figure out if
So
it was a
you
good
don't
idea to kill
believe-
General Soleimani, and you said it was
believe
bad.
they're trying to murder Trump?
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. If you really
We
believe
are
that.
carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
We're not
at all.
bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
This is high
Israel.
stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at
No,
war with Iran right now, people are listening.
We are not bombing them.
Oh, okay.
Israel is bombing them. And why did you do the snide? Oh,
What do
okay.
you mean? Because this is super high stakes stuff. This is a huge country that borders a lot of other important countries. All the world's energy comes from there.
So
We
let
don't
me ask you,
want another disaster. You don't want to
Tucker,
be
the
reckless.
Ayatollah refers to Israel as the little Satan, America is the
I
great
know.
Satan. Do you believe him when he says it's the great Satan? Do you
believe
think?
it. Of course I
Do you think if
believe
the Ayatollah could murder both of us right now that he would? I do. I believe it.
Okay, I assume no good faith on the part of the Ayatollah.
No,
and if your implication is like
it's not
I'm
good
pro
faith.
Ayatollah or something,
No, it's not good faith. It's that
just saying you're a lawmaker, you're a powerful person in Washington. This is the most powerful country in the world. If you're calling for toppling in government, it's incumbent on you to know something about the country and to think through the consequences of that. And you haven't, and you don't. And I'm saying that's
I haven't thought. Okay, you engage in reckless rhetoric with no facts. And to be clear,
I'm not calling for the
put out a
overthrow of the
newsletter.
government.
You
You are.
put out a newsletter attacking Donald Trump and calling him complicit.
I'm not
I can
attacking
read
Donald
you.
Trump.
Yes, you have. And by the way,
campaigned for Donald Trump.
Okay, yes,
This is like after anti-Semitism, this is the last refuge. You're an anti-Semite and you hate Trump.
okay,
I love Trump.
I will read. You put out a whole newsletter saying Trump has
All right.
abandoned America first. And here's what Trump said in response. Well, considering that I'm the one that developed America first, and considering that the term wasn't used until I came along, I think I'm the one who decides that. For those people who say they want peace, you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So for all of those wonderful people who don't want to do anything about Iran having a nuclear weapon, that's not peace. That was directed at you.
Man, you got me. Busted.
No, I'm just saying.
Look, my views. Look, I like Trump. I campaigned for Trump. I know Trump. I talked to him last night. Not against Trump. You know that.
But you're against his foreign policy.
I think that we should be very careful about entering into more foreign wars that don't help us when our country is dying.
When you say
and our
don't
country is
help us,
dying.
Look, yes, focus on our country. I'm all for it. But the naivete.
You don't even know how much money this costs. You don't know anything about the country's government you want to overthrow, and you're calling me reckless.
I want to stop a lunatic who wants to murder us from getting nuclear weapons that could kill millions of Americans.
Fair.
You say, I can't see how that benefits America in any way. That is bizarre. And by the way,
Bizarre.
isolationism, your foreign policy is the foreign policy of Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama.
Oh, absolutely.
And it doesn't work.
I'm a big leftist. I mean, this is so silly. Now I'm Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama. Okay. Let me just say one last thing.
So how is your foreign policy different from Jimmy Carter's? Seriously.
Please.
I asked that question seriously.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Jimmy Carter?
So
What century is this? I am the product of the last 25 years, watching carefully, being involved in the periphery, and I see an unending string of foreign policy disasters that have impoverished and hurt.
unending string.
An unending string. They would include Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and our inability to stop the Houthis, by the way, in Yemen, which exposes us as weak, and I grieve over that. So these are failures. You helped preside over some of them as a member of the Senate.
What failures, foreign policy failures have I presided over?
Well, we were unable to beat Russia in the war that you supported against Russia. You've been spending the last 3 years telling us that Vladimir Putin is evil and we're going to beat him with other people's children, and 1 million of those kids are now dead. You've never apologized for that. That's a full
By the way, look, the level of number of falsehoods you lay out just in one statement are rather
You haven't
stunning.
supported the war against Russia?
Are rather stunning. So the war against Russia was caused, which I had explained in great detail, by Joe Biden's weakness.
But you supported the war.
If you want to talk, we can talk Russia and Ukraine. I'm happy to talk about it.
Do you think that's been a success?
No, it's been an absolute disaster.
Okay, but you supported it. Shouldn't you apologize?
No, you should apologize. I'm not
what?
going to engage in the demanding of apologies. So I'm
like, that's my point. Is all these failures, no one ever says I'm sorry.
Or do you just throw out if you want to talk, we can talk.
Okay, I do. I want to know why. That seems like a true disaster for the United States. You have supported it.
Do you believe Joe Biden's weakness caused the war in Ukraine?
I think Joe Biden's aggression caused it.
His aggression? What
He
aggression?
demanded that Ukraine join NATO. How does that help the United States?
It is a terrible idea, and I have vigorously opposed Ukraine joining NATO.
Okay, so that's what caused the war.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Did you want to know what caused the war? Like, you do the dismissive. You're not actually interested in facts. You're like, okay.
Okay, tell me. It seems super. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. That is a take of mine that is wrong, and I mean with sincerity. I'm sorry to do that to you. I just think it seems so obvious that sending Kamala Harris to the NATO Security Conference to say you're going to join NATO is what triggered the invasion days later.
Okay, so can I get this? Will take a few minutes to lay out because it's complicated, but I think the facts matter. I think two things caused the war in Ukraine. Number one, I think Biden's incredible weakness and the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, I believe we need to leave Afghanistan, but not with the incompetence that led to 13 servicemen and women being murdered by terrorists there. The way Biden did that was disastrous, and I think our enemies looked to the commander-in-chief and said, this president is weak. And when that withdrawal was so disastrous, I said publicly at the time, the chances of Putin invading Ukraine have just risen tenfold.
Right.
But secondly, and this is critically
I agree, that was awful, the withdrawal.
And it was a major cause of our enemies all said, hey, this president is weak. And so it invited, and by the way, look, I despise war, and I think weakness and isolationism produces war. because it invites aggression from our bad guys. It's why I agree with Ronald Reagan's peace through strength. The best way you avoid war is being strong enough that your enemies don't want to mess with you. But let's get back to Ukraine and Russia. Look, Putin didn't wake up 2 years ago and decided he wanted to invade Ukraine. He's wanted to invade Ukraine for decades. Putin has referred to the collapse of the Soviet Union as, quote, the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. And Putin has long been explicit. His desire is to reassemble the old Soviet Union and, in fact, reassemble the Russian Empire that was even bigger than that. If you want to reassemble the Soviet Union, the natural place to start is Ukraine.
Do you really believe that Putin has territorial designs on Eastern Europe?
Yes.
What countries?
He has said that you can go and read his... Hold on. I don't want to lose the narrative of what happened, so we can go back and do that, but I don't want to lose telling the story first. So let me explain this, and then if you want to go back, we can take all sorts of digressions, but just give me a couple of minutes to lay out the facts of what happened. He has wanted to invade Ukraine a long time, and he's done it before. In 2014, he invaded Ukraine, invaded Crimea. When Barack Obama was president, he invaded the southern portion. He did not invade the rest of the country. Why? And the reason is, the principal source of revenue for Russia is oil and gas, and the natural gas pipelines run right through the country of Ukraine, and he didn't want to jeopardize his ability to get gas to Europe.
Right.
So, in 2015, Putin started a project called Nord Stream 2.
Did anything happen in 2014?
In terms of what?
Wasn't there a coup in Ukraine run by the Obama administration?
Let me finish telling, I told you, we'll take lots of digressions in a second. Let me finish telling the narrative. 2015, Putin began building Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 is an undersea pipeline that runs from Russia to Germany. The entire purpose of Nord Stream 2 is when it was completed and turned on, it would let Russia circumvent Ukraine and get its gas straight to Europe. In 2019, Nord Stream 2 was almost complete. And the conventional wisdom in Washington was, this is terrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. I didn't believe that. So I drafted sanctions legislation that was targeted to stop the pipeline. My legislation passed the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. It passed the House, and Donald Trump signed it into law.
Why wouldn't you want Germany to have cheap energy?
Because it empowers Russia. And I believe in making our enemies weaker and our friends stronger.
Has blowing up Nord Stream made Germany stronger?
Not being dependent on Russia has made Germany stronger.
Do you think Germany is stronger now than it was 4 years ago?
I think not being dependent on Russia. Germany has all sorts of problems, and many of them are domestic to their own politics. Hold on, let me finish. I'm trying to...
No, but what you're saying, it doesn't... Germany seems so much weaker now that its energy costs have spiked and the manufacturing sector is collapsing because of that.
Let me finish. I'm focused on America's interest. I don't want Russia stronger because I believe Russia is our enemy. You and I disagree on that. We can talk about that. But I want our enemies weaker. I don't want to go to war with Russia, but I want our enemies weaker. I don't want Europe dependent on Russia. I don't want Putin rich with oil and gas revenues and able to invest in his military and pose a threat to America. So, the sanctions legislation that I authored, it passed. Putin stopped building Nord Stream 2 literally the day that President Trump signed my sanctions legislation into law. He signed it, if I remember right, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday. Putin stopped construction at 6:45 p.m. So the sanctions legislation worked, and it killed the pipeline. The pipeline lay dormant for over a year, just a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. Joe Biden came into office. He was sworn in on January 20th, 2021. Putin resumed deep-sea construction of Nord Stream 2 4 days later, January 24th. He did so because Biden had foreshadowed weakness on this issue. That foreshadowing was accurate because several months later, Biden formally waived the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 and let Putin complete the pipeline. In January of 2022, I forced a vote on the Senate floor to reimpose sanctions on Nord Stream 2. The week of the vote, President Zelensky in Ukraine publicly called on the Senate, please pass this sanctions legislation. It is the last best hope of stopping Russia from invading Ukraine. At the same time, the government of Poland put out a formal statement from the foreign ministry to the Senate, calling on the Senate to pass my sanctions legislation, and said, if you do not, Putin will invade Ukraine. The day of the vote, Joe Biden came to Capitol Hill. It's the first time in his presidency he had done that. He went to the Democrat senators' lunch, and he personally lobbied them on this issue, not any other issue. This was his number one issue that he came to lobby them on. They came out of that lunch. Every Democrat had voted with me twice against Nord Stream 2. 44 Democrats flipped their vote. They voted in favor of Russia, in favor of Putin, and 4 weeks later, Russia invaded Ukraine. That was the direct cause of the war, and if Trump had been president, there would be no war.
So, may I ask, I, of course, disagree with your analysis completely, but I want to be respectful.
Okay. So tell me what you disagree with.
It's such a long conversation. I've spent the last couple of years on this, and I just respectfully disagree with your analysis, but I don't doubt your sincerity that you believe that Putin is our enemy, that Western Europe should not be allowed to use Russian energy. I mean, you seem to really believe these things. My question is about results, because I think it's relevant to what we're seeing now in Iran. You look back, after having you personally voted to send billions and billions and billions of U.S. tax dollars to Zelensky to support his civil service in the war against Russia and all this stuff, can you say that what you did worked?
So I can say what I did personally, sanctioning Nord Stream 2 worked and prevented a war, and if Trump had still been there, if the sanction had been in effect, there would be no war. I'm in favor of avoiding wars.
But once the war broke out, you voted to fund it to the tune of billions and billions and billions.
And to be clear...
And did that work?
Okay, to be clear, what I voted for the initial tranche of funding, and then I voted against the subsequent one. So it hasn't worked. So I've been in between. I haven't been on the full Ukraine, full-throated hawk side or the anti from day one. I voted for the initial tranche of funding because I wanted Russia to lose. I think the Biden administration administered it in a horrible way. I think they wasted a ton of money. And I think what they did was actually incoherent because they were funding both sides of the war. And I was very vocal. And among other things, flooding $100 million to Iran, which was used, among other things, to help the nuclear program, but also to make drones that Russia used to fight.
So here's my concern. I'm not going to defend the Biden administration. Really did a lot to wreck the United States.
Yeah, the most
damaging administration. At the end, where we sit now, Russia is stronger. It's closely allied long-term with China.
I don't know that Russia's stronger. I don't think that's right.
I think it's pretty obvious that it is. But it's certainly not destroyed. And it's allied long-term with China.
Maybe. Look, there's no doubt Biden's foreign policy drove Russia into the arms of China, and that's concerning. They also have a long history of animosity.
Western Europe is weaker and more in debt. The United States is weaker and much more in debt. Hold on. So we're agreeing. Here's my question. Have you questioned any of your previous assumptions? Did you play any role in this at all? Are you responsible at all?
Of course, and like you said,
what have you learned?
Like you said you've changed your mind.
Yeah.
I voted for the first funding of the Ukraine war, and I voted against every subsequent funding stream because it wasn't working. And I looked at what was happening and said, this is not working. And had the money been spent in an intelligent way and not wasted, and had it been successful, I might have been willing to fund more. But it wasn't successful, so I voted no. And the war's going to end. Look, President Trump campaigned on ending the war. I think he's frustrated because Putin has been less than eager to reach a deal to end the war, but it's going to end. You're not going to see another dollar.
Do you think Zelensky wants to end the war?
I think Zelensky has behaved horribly. I think his Oval Office meeting will go down in history as the worst Oval Office meeting of any leader that has ever come to the Oval Office. I think he behaved like a pompous ass. And I think he is unrealistic. I think Zelensky spends his time with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the New York Times, and he believed he was going to the Oval Office as a resist figure. And I think he's doing real damage to his country right
You described him many times as a hero.
I don't recall ever using the word hero. I will say, look, I'm not a Zelensky cheerleader, and I'm not in the business of saying everyone we support has to be a saint and everyone we oppose has to be a villain. I'm not in the morality game. I'm in the U.S. interest game. Why did I want Nord Stream 2 stopped? Because it would strengthen Russia, and Russia's our enemies. It's entirely U.S. interest.
Did you support the industrial sabotage against it, blowing it up?
So I think you believe America did that. Is that right?
Of course.
Okay, I think the chances of that are zero.
You think Russia did it?
No, I think Ukraine did it. Okay, so I don't know. So I don't know who did it. In terms of the theories that have been put out there, the idea that Russia blew up their own pipeline never made any sense to me at all. That just, I can't even articulate why they would do that. The idea that Biden did that, look, I could see it being in U.S. interest to do that, to blow up Nord Stream 2. I just think Biden was too weak. I don't believe Joe Biden.
But are you in? I guess you in.
So that leads
the Norwegians, the Ukrainians, NATO, whatever.
Look, that leads me to, you know, who benefits? And it leads me to think either the Ukrainians blew it up or Ukraine's allies. I don't think Biden did because Biden was so weak, I don't think he would give the order. I find that implausible.
But you're in favor of it.
Look, I was in favor of stopping it. I think blowing it up was a good thing. So I'm supportive of that. But I don't think America did that. I don't think Biden gave that order.
But in general,
I can see Trump giving that order, but he wasn't in office.
Yeah, and you think that the largest act of industrial sabotage in history helped our allies in Western Europe or other fellow NATO members?
Look, I gotta say, I don't understand. For some reason, you are really invested in defending Russia, and I don't get that. I'm not attacking you with that. I'm genuinely, I don't get why you're so passionate about defending Russia.
Actually, I was defending Western Europe, the home of my ancestors, and that, tripling their energy costs and destroying their industrial base. Not like. You just accused me of being an anti-Semite, an isolationist, and a Russia lackey. I've not called you a neocon once, which you are, but I haven't said
that. That's absurd. Those neocons that oppose the Iraq War. That's
okay, but I haven't called you that because
you just said, which you are. So you just called that. Okay. Called me that. You just did.
I guess what I'm saying is you're triggered because I use name calling. I get it. I was triggered when you called me names, and I'm triggered once again that you're calling me a Russia defender when in fact I'm defending Western Europe. And I don't think that you think Putin's our enemy. Well, he's literally our enemy. You are funding a war against him.
Do you think he is our enemy? You're saying we're his enemy. Do you think Putin is our enemy?
I think it is a tragedy that your policies, specifically yours, helped drive Putin into the arms of China, forming a bloc that's larger than us.
So you won't answer that question?
I don't. He is literally our enemy right now. That is a tragedy for the United States.
No, you're saying, but you won't say he is our enemy. Look, I don't know
in what sense. I don't want to be enemies with Russia. It doesn't help us at all. It may help some people in the United States, but in general, I don't want to be.
I don't want to be at war with Russia. I don't think it is in our interest to be at war with Russia.
With China. That is a disaster.
But listen, no doubt, and I want Russia and China in tension, so I agree with you there. But I think Putin is a KGB thug. I think he is a bad man. Now, I don't want to go to war with him over that, but I'm not naive, and I watched your episode.
He's a bad man. Okay.
Look, I watched your episode where you went to the Russian grocery store, and
was that disloyal, do you think?
It was just weird. It was like a promo video for Russia, and I don't understand. I'm not attacking you when I ask why, because I'm genuinely, I don't get
like when you call me anti-Semitic. You weren't attacking me, you were just noticing.
No,
but may I ask you a question? So, here, let me just answer yours by saying the United States, the Biden administration, with your help, full support, began this war on Russia in response to their invasion of Ukraine. And one of the things was they kicked Russia out of SWIFT, out of the international financial system. And my first response was, this is going to really hurt the U.S. dollar, which it has. And I hope someday we can have a conversation about that. It's really, really hurt the one thing that we needed, which was to retain dollar supremacy. So I was interested in the economic conditions.
By the way, that's a reasonable point and a serious conversation.
I'm aware. And
but I can agree with you. But
I was accused of being. I think it's weird that you went to a Russian grocery store and said it was prosperous. No, my point is
it looked like a commercial. It looked like a commercial. It's wonderful.
No, it was an argument against the efficacy of sanctions. Sanctions against Russia, which you casually and enthusiastically imposed, scoring a little moral victory every time, had no material effect that helped the United States. Russia is backstopped by China, and I recommend that you go there and see it. It is way nicer than Washington, D.C. Way nicer. To me, that's a tragedy. I was horrified and angry at my leaders, including you. It's like, I want to live in a country that's nice, with low food costs and no homeless people. I don't understand why that's too much to ask.
So do
Instead, I get worse with Iran. No, I just want lower food costs. How's that?
So, look, it's a weird argument that you do often, which is, listen, things are crappy in America. Liberals have done bad things to America, so we shouldn't worry about
No,
any
not
enemies
liberals.
around the
Republican
world.
senators, they
Republicans
don't care about us. They're focused on other countries.
You wrote that
and
in-
our country is dying, and you don't care because you're focused on Iran or Putin.
So you believe that I don't care about America. I guess you believe Donald Trump doesn't either. Like nobody cares.
I
Because
believe that your focus is way too on other countries. It's way too focused outward. The money that you send abroad could be used here and should be.
What money did I send abroad, by the way? I emphatically agree with
Ukraine. You don't even know.
I emphatically agree with Donald Trump's, for example, dramatically slashing USAID. I think the only reason we should be deploying that is to benefit U.S. interest, national security interest, and keep Americans safe. And so,
how much did you vote to send to Ukraine?
look, you're in about $80 billion.
$80 billion.
Yeah. So you're in. You love just giving these broad characterizations that are not accurate. I'm genuinely puzzled. Look, I don't want to go to war with Russia, but I don't think they're our friend. I think Putin.
I agree.
I think Putin is a murderer. I think he's a liar, and I think he does not wish well on America.
Okay.
And there's a difference between saying that, just like Reagan referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire, and Putin was in the KGB. Look, my father was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba. I hate communists. It was actually Batista that tortured my dad. My aunt was imprisoned and tortured by Castro. I hate communists. I think communism is evil. And so I think there is a value to, there is nobody who stands up to communist China more in the Senate than I do. Because I think they're evil. Do I want to go to war with China? Of course not. That would be ridiculous, but I think we have all sorts of tools to stand up to our enemies, and I think China is engaged in a 1,000-year war against the United States.
Okay.
They're trying to defeat us.
We're so all over the map. Your family in prison in Cuba and China and all stuff. I agree with you. I'm totally opposed to communism, always have been. I don't think that Putin loves us. I'm distressed by the moral condition of most leaders around the world. Most of them, they all kill people. I'm against that. I'm just saying, I wish the focus here was more on the
Can I say
United
something?
States.
I actually don't agree with that statement. They all kill people. There's a moral relativism. So I don't think Donald Trump is a murderer. He doesn't kill people. We don't have concentration
Donald
camps.
Trump a murderer.
You just said world leaders all kill people, and there's a moral relativism.
I'm hardly a moral relativist.
But you are. You just, that statement was the essence.
I'm an anti-Semite, an isolationist, a moral relativist. Okay, no, I'm not.
Did you just say
I'm
world
saying,
leaders all
I'm
kill
saying
people?
I'm against killing people in general.
So,
and hyperventilating about how Putin was in the KGB or whatever. I just want to serve American interests, and pushing into China is not in our interest at all. And you helped do it, and you haven't apologized.
and by the way, you're the cheerleader. I helped drive him into China. It's a
did.
complete lie.
You funded the war against him.
No, I authored the legislation that shut down Nord Stream 2 that prevented the war, and if Trump had still been in the White House, we would have had the war. And look, the comment you made, that the reason things like moral relativism are so dangerous, oh, everyone kills people. No, there is a difference. In the United States, we don't have concentration camps. We don't torture and murder people. You look at China, where they've got 1 million prisoners in concentration camps. You look at Putin, where he's got prisoners in Siberia. He tortures and murders his political opponents. Donald Trump doesn't do that. America doesn't do that. And by the way,
what are you
most
even
other
talking
countries
about?
don't do that.
I see the game. It's like, I'm distressed. I'm distressed.
No, I'm responding to facts. You don't like the facts.
I don't even know what facts you're talking about. I'm not saying that Trump puts people in concentration camps. I campaign for Trump. I love Trump.
So did I.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with Trump. I'm merely saying.
You said every world leader kills people. It draws us
just
all
more
in this.
emphasis on what's happening inside the country. That's it.
Is there a moral difference between America and our enemies? Is there a moral difference between America?
Of course.
And what is it? But articulate it.
I'm
It's
American.
valuable to say why. Why are we a better country founded on better values than China?
I'll tell
What's
you.
the
I'll
difference?
tell you why.
And I know.
Because the whole purpose of America is to protect the God-given rights that each person possesses by virtue of being created by God, by being human. That's the point of our founding documents, and no other country articulates that in the way that we do. And that's what I love about America. My family's been here a long time. I'm never leaving. So I really love the country. Despite going to a Russian grocery store, despite asking questions about AIPAC, I love America, is the truth. And I love Trump. So, but I just want more emphasis on America. That's it.
I emphatically agree with America first. I think Donald Trump does as well. And I think his foreign policy has been vigorously protecting that. And I agree with the president.
Good. Well, I appreciate you taking all this time.
Sure.
And I know you didn't mean it. You called me those names. Thank you, Senator.